is how do I keep this so it's not out of date? And so we wanted to take a little bit more of a modular approach, which means, in some training videos, a lot of the times they will have like a step-by-step kind of, okay, let's do this in this video, then let's do this in the next video, and we're going to build on top of that in the next video. But then what that means is you're connecting those videos together, which then means if you update one video, you're going to have to update the next video and update the next video because it could kind of throw things off. And so the modular approach that I took was more, let's do those connector videos, and I call them in-action sections. And so at the end of a module, we have some in-action videos for the modules that it makes sense on. And so I do, at the end of that, say, okay, now let's take everything that we've learned and let's put it inside of a flow.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce. I'm the host of Visual Lounge. Today, we're going to be talking about something I think is really fascinating, at least for me. I hope it is for you as well. We're going to be talking about the building of a certification program. Now, you might be thinking, I don't build certification programs, and that's okay. If you've ever had to put together a complex series of training that involves like technology, and you're like, how do I get people from A to Z along that path? Or for our international friends, A to Z, there's lots that goes into that. And how do you do that in a way that maybe is a little bit more modular? How do you make it do it in a way that you can update along the way? Because we know software these days is always changing. That's the conversation we're going to have today with my friend and yours, Jeff Batt. So let's go ahead and introduce Jeff. Jeff Batt has 15 years of experience in the digital learning and media industry. He is the founder and trainer at Learning Dojo, a company dedicated to training you to become a software ninja in various e-learning, web, and mobile-related software applications. Jeff has also worked for Amazon as a learning experience developer. Jeff was a program manager over DevLearn for the Learning Guild, helping program conferences. And Jeff often speaks on developmental technologies such as XAPI, HTML5, Camtasia, augmented reality, mobile development, e-learning, development tools, and more. And he's the guy I go to when I've got those tech questions. So please help me welcome Jeff Batt to the Visual Lounge. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going so good, and I'm so glad I get to talk to you because I always enjoy it so much. We're going to start where we start with everybody, Jeff. I got first question for you. What's one tip that you would want to give my audience about improving their use of images or video in their work?
I think the thing that kind of, when I look back at when I was starting here, I mean, number one, to get started, just start testing, even if you have like just your iPhone or Android phone, is just get started. But number two, one thing that really improved the quality of my videos was lighting. Getting some good lighting, especially a softbox with your key light, your main light. Having a good softbox takes your video level to a whole nother realm, basically. So that would be like the first thing. If you can invest in a good light and a good microphone, obviously, that would probably just up the quality of your videos right away.
Yeah, I love that because and I know you've heard me say this, but the order of operations is audio, light, and then camera. We say it a lot. So, all right. Well, I want to dig into certification. Now, you have just recently, within the past couple of months, completed building out the Camtasia certification on our behalf of TechSmith. And I want to talk about that process, because I think there's a lot we can learn from what you went through. So maybe we start kind of at the beginning. What's the big picture look like for certification when you're tackling a project like a tool like Camtasia? Where do you even begin?
Yeah, it's a lot because and it is a software application, so it changes quite frequently. I've been teaching software applications for 15 years. And so talking about software that you may create a video and then when you update and you publish out that video, it may be out of date or something like that. And so when I got approached to be part of this certification, to be able to create the certification, that was honestly one of the number one things that TechSmith talked to me about and that I was thinking about as well, is how do I keep this so it's not out of date? We knew about a new release coming up and we wanted to still kind of start creating training and not be completely out of date or completely thrown out once the new release had actually come out. And so keeping that in mind, we took more of a modular approach. And so when I say we, I'm talking about the TechSmith team that I worked with as well to kind of think through that stuff. And so we wanted to take a little bit more of a modular approach, which means, in some training videos, and when I went through training videos myself growing up, or, learning how to program and doing other things like that, a lot of the times they will have like a step-by-step kind of, okay, let's do this in this video, then let's do this in the next video, and we're going to build on top of that in the next video, which I think is beneficial. And that, I don't want to say that that's not beneficial, but then what that means is you're connecting those videos together, which then means if you update one video, you're going to have to update the next video and update the next video, because it could kind of throw things off. And so the modular approach that I took was more, okay, let's do those connector videos, and I call them in-action sections. And so at the end of a module, we have some in-action videos for the modules that it makes sense on. And so I do, at the end of that, say, okay, now let's take everything that we've learned and let's put it inside of a flow. But up until then, we're basically focused on different features. So we're focused on, okay, how to add an animation, just the basics of animation. What is animation? And how to add that animation and to add it to any other object. And so we're talking about just more of this kind of encompassing type of self-service video, essentially, that can then, it could work into the next video. You can continue on from that, but it's not so connected to every other part of the video until you get to these in-action sections. And in those in-action sections, you then have that flow, say, okay, now let's put it all together. Let's do all the flow there, which then helps you to, when you're going to update the course, you can go in and update those videos a lot easier. And so that's one thing that we found so far, because I've had to do a couple of updates, is being able to go back into just one video was a whole lot easier. Or even adding another video, like a new topic or a new feature, was a whole lot easier without throwing off the whole flow than it was to, like, if we had everything kind of connected. So it's a little bit backwards, I would say, than when you hear most people talk about when they're talking about software training. But with as much as, like, Camtasia updates, I don't know, to me, it made sense. And so far, I think it's been working well on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard really good things about people that have gone through it and they've looked at it and they've been able to learn from it. I want to step back as we look at this kind of process and think from like a learning design standpoint, because I do think it's interesting. Because look, I was there at the very beginning when we designed the first iteration of the certification. I've not been involved in this iteration. Definitely, we did that style that you talked about. Like, it's kind of like, here's a project, and all the videos kind of lead you through the project. But when you're designing something in the way that you're talking, particularly because, things are changing, video, it has certain, there's certain things you have to do that in video because of the medium that it is. What are some of the kind of guidelines or considerations you would, like, if someone said, hey, Jeff, we want you to consult on this project, we're going to be building all this stuff, but like, we need your help designing this. Are there guidelines or kind of things that you would give to that person to say, like, hey, this is how you think through this? Because it does sound like I could do feature, but maybe there's something that has to be true in those in-action sections. Thoughts?
Yeah. So it is, I mean, if you are focused on features, you are focused on, how these different things work. What you have to take a step back almost, and you have to look at it holistically of, like, what are the most important parts of it? So I'll take the animation section, for example. So we talked about animation. We talked about what the animation basics are, how to add a custom animation. But then it's really thinking through, if you're the one developing this, it's thinking through, okay, what's some real world experience that I can do? And I think that part is important. But I think that comes, at least for my process of learning, I like to, like, play around with different things and test out different things, and then put it all together inside of, like, okay, now how do I create an animated logo? Or how do I create an animated intro or something like that, which takes all of, maybe not every single one of those steps that we did before, but it at least takes most of the steps and puts it together inside of that flow. So I think taking a step back and, like, okay, what are some real world examples that somebody will go through? And because I think part of the problem is, if you're just focused on the real world examples, is you're not thinking through different, you're not talking about all the options. You're just talking about what is needed to do that interaction, which then you kind of miss some things, because when you're talking just about the feature, in this case, you could be talking about, okay, in this scenario, you may want to do this. In this scenario, you may want to do that. So it's a little bit of a different approach, but I think it's, if you connect, take a step back, connect at least most of what you talked about inside of that real world example, that's where I think it kind of brings it all together.
Okay. So I know from just getting to know you over the last couple of years, you do a lot of video. You've done, like you said, a lot of software training, a lot of kind of technology type training videos. Obviously, you've got a beautiful setup there that you've worked hard to design. I'm curious, through this process of focusing on kind of a video first experience in the certification, what maybe was like any ahas or learning experiences that you had about the video creation piece of it? Obviously there's the design side of the certification, but like, I don't even know how many, like it's a lot of videos, I'm pretty sure, in that certification. So is there something that came out of that you're like, gosh, you've learned along the ways that wisdom could be shared?
Yeah. And I think probably the most impactful one was learning to script, because I've been doing a lot of these, and I've done a lot of tutorials for Pluralsight and Udemy and stuff like that. But in most of them, I would outline it, but I wouldn't actually script it. And I don't know, I felt like I needed to, like the outline didn't actually, or the outline would allow me to get the points, but it didn't restrict me as far as what I was saying, because I tried it before and it sounded more robotic. But in this go round, when I was starting to work with TechSmith, and when you're working, when I'm creating these courses by myself, most of the time, I'm not working with another stakeholder. I'm just kind of creating some training. But in this case, I was working directly with TechSmith, and I was working with another stakeholder, and they wanted to make sure that all the terms and everything were correct. And that is one thing. Initially, we started creating videos without me scripting. And that was good for a few of the videos, but then we started running into some other videos where they're like, oh, we want to make sure that we reference this. We want to make sure that we call this. And that was the eye-opener. I'm like, I'm going to have to script. I'm going to have to go in there and script it. And so when I thought it was initially going to be a lot harder than what it ended up being, but the benefit from scripting, though, that I learned was the fact that it does seem to condense it and make your videos shorter. Some videos that I've created for just one video ended up being like 10 minutes or something like that. But when I scripted it, it was very much more condensed, and it would be only like 2 to 3 minutes, because I wasn't going off on different topics or, different things that came to my mind as I was recording it. So I think there's some benefit to that. But going back to being able to update your videos as well, if I need to go back and update a video, I have the script right there, and it makes it a whole lot easier for me to go back into the script, update the script, record it really quick, or maybe just record just a portion of it or whatever's changed in the audio, and then just put it back into Camtasia and edit that as well. So that was probably the biggest aha for me in going through this part, was the scripting part. And making sure that all the terms, and working with TechSmith and everything, just to make sure that we get it all correct.
Yeah, I think I love that, because for years I've talked about scripts, and it's easy to not script, right? Like it's easy to say like, oh, I'm good at this, I know this. But I love your point that it's like, well, you can hit your terms, you can make sure you're referencing the right things, you can also condense stuff. So I think that's a great takeaway. Let's continue talking about the updating, because I think this is a big concern when anyone I know is making particularly a series of videos, right? And it's whether it's a certification or just they've got a rollout for new technology inside their organization, it becomes very difficult to think about like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to make updates in 3 months, 6 months, a year, because video, by the nature of what it is once it's edited, it's not as dynamic as say text, right? Like I can go into a Word doc and I can change anything. Video is a little harder. So I'm curious, what processes or steps have you taken to make sure that you can replicate the thing that you did? So like if you did this in March, there's voice, there's the way the screen looks, just all the kind of elements that could be different. How do you address that? Or maybe you say like, oh, you don't. I'm curious what you've got for us.
Yeah, I think what I have done in the past, I mean, we're going back and we're updating some of the modules now because it was recorded kind of a little bit earlier. And so we're just going through and updating, I think, module 2 and module 3. And what we're doing there is recording it just with the newer version of Camtasia, so Camtasia 2024. With those, I'm not going to have to change the audio because I recorded the audio separate. I basically can hit play on the audio and go into Camtasia 2024. And then just as I hit play, just do the steps that I'm hearing. And so that is one benefit, or you can just have your script up and you can kind of pause it and time it, and then you can post edit it afterwards. So that's helpful if you just go in and need to update the screen because the screen layout has changed. But one other thing that's been also very helpful is taking the project files on every single video. And I usually create like a Dropbox file or, whatever, Dropbox or OneDrive or whatever you're using. And what I will do is create a folder for each module. And then inside of the module, I'll create a folder for each video. And then as I start to record, I have a Camtasia file separate for each video inside of that folder. But I also have the audio file. I have the script file in there. And then I have the project file. So whatever project file I'm working with, I will save it at the end of the video, and I will copy the project file that I was working with on the screen, and I will place it, whatever project files you may use. If it's a website, obviously you may not be able to do that, but if you just copy those project files in, then you basically, and I always take the last one as the starting one, and so I have a starter project file, and I have an ending project file with that point in time that I was actually at. So it takes a couple extra minutes to do, but when I'm going in to update that video, if I need to update something about the project, maybe I need to record the screen, maybe I don't, maybe I just need to update some audio, but if I need to record the screen, then I can just go into that project file and have it exactly in that moment of time in my process there.
So, okay, Jeff, for all of us who are not as organized as you, how do we get to be good at staying organized? You laid it out for us, but I don't, that's the hard part, right? Like actually just taking the time to do those things.
Yeah, my brain works in Trello. Trello has been the most helpful thing for me. If I don't have my Trello board up when I'm creating a course, I don't have a brain, really. That's the necessity that I have here. And so that's the first thing that I do when I'm creating my project or I'm creating the course, is I have a Trello board, and then on that Trello board, I have all of the different modules, and that really starts to help me think through, okay, here's the overall step for this, or the kind of the section, and then in that section, here's step 1, step 2, step 3 that we need to do, or here's the kind of topics we need to cover. And then with the Trello board, I'm able to kind of reorganize and reposition things and think through that. So that's where my process is pretty much working inside of Trello. And then once I have the video down, that's where I start to add tasks. And each of the tasks is like, create the folder, create the project file, add a description of what's going to go on inside of that. It's mundane. That a lot of the stuff when you're working on this type of project stuff is not glorious. It's not like the most glamorous thing you can do, but it is incredibly important because then number one, like we're talking about, going back and updating a course, if you have everything organized like that, you can go right into that folder, right into that location. You already have it inside of Trello. If you need to open up a new task inside of that card, you can do that. But then also, if you're working with stakeholders, I had, the TechSmith team go into Trello, and they were working on adding their own tasks and marking things off when they reviewed it, adding different comments on there. We also use like the review tool, I'm slipping, my mind is slipping.
Video review or screencast.com.
Video review.
Yep.
Yeah, screencast. Yeah, thank you. So we'd use that for like feedback, and then, or we'd use Trello during the planning process before it was like a video. So that's, if you're laying it out like that and you're doing those mundane tasks, I think your life is going to be a whole lot easier when you're in the production or updating content later on when you're in that kind of process.
Well, I it's not glamorous, as you said, but I do think I can see that connection. And I'm out of curiosity, if you remember, how many videos were you creating for the certification?
Let's see. So I have the Trello board pulled up right now, and we had 11 different modules, and I would say probably almost 10 per module. So it was over 100 or so.
Yeah. And I can imagine someone receiving this project for, you know, like, and they're like, hey, we're going to roll out the system. Here you go. You need to make 100 videos. And everybody internally says, no, we're not. We're not making 100 videos.
Nope.
But what I can see is this scale. And I know this took time. It's not like this was done overnight. But what I can appreciate is that it is these things that we do that make this easier. So I'm not as organized as I should be, but I appreciate that I can see how that would make all the difference. And plus I gotta imagine it's a peace of mind, right? Like, you know, you don't miss anything if you put in all the work to organize it.
Well, yeah, and I've done that same process with the Trello board several times now. So it's almost like a learned habit. So once you've actually done it a few times, it becomes a whole lot easier. So I'm not saying that it would be like a complete huge task to kind of do that, but it is something that you do have to pick up. It's something that you have to implement for a little bit, and then it just becomes kind of second nature to you. But because of that, though, I was able to, a different course that I created for my day job, I was able to create a course within that had 6 different modules. So it was a little bit smaller, and I would say probably about 4 to 5 videos per module or so, like something like that. And I was able to do that within a week because I already had the content. I already knew the content. So this one I didn't script, but I had a very similar kind of outline where I'd go in and just hit record, or I'd have an intro at the very beginning. It's me on camera at the end of it. But all of the other videos were just, you know, the Camtasia screen recordings and stuff. And to me, I found that a whole lot easier because I followed that same type of outline, that same type of process. Trello board, outlined it, and then added tasks for each of them, created the folders. And it does sound like a lot, but it is, like I mentioned, it's something that you just get used to, and it's something that goes a whole lot smoother every time you do it.
Yeah. Jeff, if it's okay, I want to ask you now, this gets a little meta because you were making a certification about Camtasia, but you were using Camtasia. And I'm curious, you know, from a learning perspective, and you know, I know you use other tools as well, but what was there stuff about Camtasia, like tools or features or functions, that you feel like really facilitated and helped your creation process as you went through this?
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting when I recorded it, because you're recording Camtasia, but you're also showing Camtasia. So that was one thing. And so I did end up using Parallels in order to record the Windows version of Camtasia. And what I was doing is I was recording it on a Mac version. So I had my Mac version, because if you don't know Parallels basically allows you to run Windows on a Mac. So it almost becomes like a different window. And so I would hit record on my Mac version, and then I would go into my Windows version and hit record there. Or not hit record, but just do whatever I was walking through on the Windows side. But as far as like in Camtasia, what I found tremendously helpful throughout the whole process, you know, I was talking about editing and so forth, but everything that I actually taught people how to do, I was already doing throughout the video. So I was editing, I had highlights, I used a lot of the highlights, I used a lot of the arrows. I had like a shape animation that would come in with a section title. I would have a title introduction that would come in. And what was most useful is when I would actually get to that part of animation, I would say, hey, you can do like title sections for this. In fact, you've been seeing it this whole time, and kind of point out those features. And when we got to the highlights, is like, you can use these highlights to call people's attention to a certain part of the screen. I've been doing this the whole time. And so it was helpful to kind of show people, like, to help click of like, oh, this is what it does. This is why I would want to do that. And same thing with like even animating in and zooming in on different parts of your screen, helping people focus in on different parts of the screen. I'm like, okay, we've been seeing this as you've been watching the videos. We've been seeing this exact thing this whole time as you've been watching from the very beginning. So,
yeah, it's from my perspective, it's one of those tools, especially when you're teaching somebody, allowing to add those annotations or the zooms or the cursor highlights to just like, yeah, this is what you should be looking at, which is, because otherwise there's no guide, right? There's nothing there to say like, hey, this is the most important thing. This is where your eye should be. You just don't know.
In fact, funny thing is, like when I do live presentations at conferences now, I turn on the accessibility on my Mac. And if you hold down, I think it's the control or option button, and then you use your control wheel, it will zoom in. And so I'm like, I'm so used to the zoom ins of Camtasia to help people focus in on different parts that I had to do that in person. And so I'm sitting there zooming in and zooming out to help people focus on that. So I blame Camtasia for that, but that's something that I do right now as well.
I love it. You're welcome to blame Camtasia for that. Just don't blame it for the other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, there's a lot more we could talk about certification. I do want to ask you, I know this is not a Camtasia kind of video focus, but you actually mixed up and changed up the quizzing. Give us a highlight. Because I know you're really proud of it. I know I've heard really good things about it. So tell us, what did you do? Because part of a certification, of course, is you're going through all this stuff, but you got to show your knowledge, right? You got to show that you've learned something. So tell us just a little bit about quizzing.
Yeah. So I've been teaching a tool just as long as Camtasia called Storyline, Articulate Storyline. And Storyline is an e-learning development tool. It basically gives you like a blank canvas, and a lot of people kind of describe it as like PowerPoint on steroids. And it allows you to create a page-by-page experience. And one thing that it does really well is it creates quizzes, and it tracks those quizzes. And the way that the certification is delivered is through a learning management system. And in that learning management system, it allows the learner to, like when the quiz pulls up, it will track the quiz and it'll score it, and it allows you to come back to see what my score was and to kind of review that. So Storyline is a great tool to be able to do that. And what I wanted to do is create a more visual type of quiz, because I didn't look at the old one just to not bias myself, but it would, I think it was just a plain static quiz, just like a form or something like that you would fill out. And so this was a little bit different, and we were able to have a page-by-page quiz experience, and we're able to take screenshots and even use like hotspots on those screenshots. And so to answer the question, it wasn't just, select, not on some of them it wasn't just select a radio button on some of them, it was like actually selecting the screen. And so that is one kind of level, but there was other review things. And that was, something that from the very beginning, my partners with TechSmith were like, we want to make this more interactive. And that's when I perk up, because that's what I really do, is make things more interactive. And so we created some other experiences that allow the person to explore and create these types of, or to explore what's possible. And so there is one, for example, when you're talking about visual effects or you're learning about visual effects, is the visual effects is like, okay, it's good to see them inside of Camtasia, but I want to explore to see what each of those do. So I created an interaction that looked very similar to the visual effects that you see in Camtasia, and it has like different rows and columns and stuff, and you see the same image. I wanted to make sure it was the same image that you see inside of the visual effects panel inside of Camtasia. But this time what you could do is you could click on it and it would pop open a modal, a little pop-up, and it has an image. It could be the same image, or some of them are different. Some of them are animated as well. And then it has a little bit of a description of what that visual effect does. And when you close that modal, it will just turn it like green, and we'll give a little check mark as well. So that was one example. The other example was a step-by-step of how to group items. And these common tasks of like, okay, what do I need to do? And so, or how do I group? How do I go into the group? How do I leave the group? How do I remove the group inside of Camtasia on the timeline? So I created this step-by-step interaction where you would see, okay, here's the step. You would see an image above it, but when you go to the next step, it would be an animated image. So it was actually an animated GIF just doing that one step that you're focused on, and you could see it loops over and over, but you can see it loop over and over to see exactly, okay, that's how I select all three items that I want to group. Okay, good. Step 2, okay, then I right click and then I select, group. So those are the things that kind of broke it down a little bit, and I created those animated GIFs using Camtasia as well. So I just recorded it like a normal video, just on one step, and then I exported it as an animated GIF and then brought it in and created that, step-by-step learning experience. And so those were things that kind of complement the quiz, but the quiz themselves were a lot more visual. And so far, I've heard some good feedback on those that have taken it on the quizzes compared to the previous quizzes. So,
yeah, well, I love, first of all, that you're incorporating like the GIFs, right? Taking those, building those in Camtasia, adding those in. But I think that, what I'm hearing is obviously you want a good experience during that quiz. You want people to feel accomplished. It should challenge their knowledge a little bit. It's a certification. And having it be visual obviously allows us, really, you as a creator, to do some things that maybe a text description may not be able to convey as well. Like we're all about the power of visuals at TechSmith, so it only makes sense to do a more visual quiz. And I love that. And I love that, this idea that like Articulate, Storyline, and Camtasia come together to really give you a really robust option and solution. So that's pretty cool.
And I think it kind of works both ways, because you could do that as a separate, you can have Camtasia as a separate thing inside of your LMS, your learning management system. And then you have Storyline to do the interactive part. But a lot of ways in the learning and development field, you can even take Camtasia videos, because Camtasia is the best with videos. And you can take Camtasia videos and you can insert them inside of Storyline, and even have built interactive videos around that as well. I've done a lot of blog posts on that, is where we have video, and then you pause the video and you give the learner a choice on the video, and depending on what they choose, it could take them to a different video. It's kind of like a branching scenario, like choose your own adventure type of scenario. So those are really compelling to be able to create those videos, and then to, on top of it, use something like Storyline to then create it to make it interactive and branching and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Jeff, we've got a lot we've said. I think it's time for us to keep moving here. We're going to move on to our speed round. So if you're new to the show, quick, fast answers determined by the roll of the dice. We're going to play a little stinger here. Jeff, are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Here we go. All right, so we've talked a lot about certification, but we've got 12 questions, and I don't know what I'm going to ask you, Jeff, because I'm going to roll the dice right now. Here we go. Look at that. It is a 2.
Number 2.
Okay. Suspend disbelief with me for a second. If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and why?
I am a Disneyland person. I am a Disney, like my daughter and I are Disney, and my wife are Disney fanatics. And so honestly, I would actually go to all of the Disney parks. So that's multiple locations. But like right now, because the Olympics is going on right now, so I would go to the Paris Disneyland. I told my wife as we were watching the Olympics, I'm like, how many people are actually at Disneyland Paris? I'm like, I'd go there right now. I wouldn't be at the Olympics. I'd be at Disneyland Paris.
I'm so glad you said Disney, because as I asked the question, I'm thinking, he's going to say Disney. He better say Disney.
I was thinking about other options of of course it's Disney. Why didn't I think of anything else?
Be true to thyself, right? So,
yep.
All right, next question here. Number 1. Ooh, this one's a little tough. Jeff, if you could have dinner with anyone, I usually say historical figure, but it could be anyone. Who would it be and why? It could be past, could be current person. You get to have dinner with them.
I would say Steve Jobs. Big Apple fanboy. Or Walt Disney, of course, but for the tech side of things, definitely Steve Jobs. I don't know how it would go based on his reputation, but it would be cool just to say that, to tell people I met Steve Jobs, I had dinner with Steve Jobs. I've been an Apple fanboy since, even before the iPhone, and working with tools like Final Cut and other things. So I would say that.
Yeah, that would be a good one. Okay. We got one more. Here we go. Dice is a rolling. Oh, we can't have a 2 again. Not that doesn't happen very often. Okay, 7. This is a good one. Okay, Jeff, I know you are a person who has several hobbies, things that you like to pursue. A lot of it is in tech. But what's a hobby or interest you've always wanted to pursue but haven't had the chance to as of yet?
Yeah, so a lot of mine, obviously you'll see I do have a lot of hobbies. I collect a lot of items too. So I have a lot of collectible items. But one thing that I've played around with that I want to do more that I just haven't had, and this is tech related, but I've wanted to do more iPhone development. So I wanted to create more actual iPhone apps, iPad apps, and I have the Apple Vision Pro as well. So creating more virtual reality AR experiences. I've dabbled in it. I've created some. I've created, a couple apps that are just like fun apps here and there for tracking. And we have we're Disney people, so I created like a countdown app for our next trip. So things like that, where I would just love to dive in and just be able to work on apps. And in fact, I think if I was to retire ever, I would probably just spend time working on mobile apps or virtual reality apps or things like that.
I love it. And it's such a great answer. Well, Jeff, thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom and thoughts today about the certification, about video, about your hobbies. Before we wrap things up though, I do want to say, I know you've got a lot of courses out there. You do consulting work and things like that. If people want to reach out to you, connect with you, how should they do that?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you just search Jeff Batt. You can also reach out to me through X, I think is now what it's called, Twitter, Jeff Batt LXD. And then you can also just go to my website, learningdojo.ninja. I do post like a weekly blog post. Sometimes it's on Camtasia, sometimes it's on Storyline, sometimes it's on other things as well. So you can check out my blog post there as well.
Yeah, and I will say that, Jeff, you do some awesome videos. If you're learning those tools, I've seen your videos on Camtasia, I've seen videos on Storyline and so forth. Really well done. We'll post the links, of course, in the comments below and things like that. Before we wrap, the last thing we usually do with our guests, Jeff, is we ask them for their final take. And the final take is the idea is to summarize, say something that maybe if you haven't said something that you wanted to say, but you got 30, 60 seconds. And so, Jeff Batt, what is your final take?
Now, I've been reflecting. I'm about to release a video about my studio. So my studio here and kind of the behind the scenes of my studio. So I've been reflecting a lot on that because it's about 3 years ago that I decided to do more on-camera videos. I've had my YouTube channel for over 12 years or so. And it was 3 years ago where I'm like, I want to really master the on-camera, the lights, the settings, everything like that. So if it comes down to it, where I would have to leave you with some advice, it'd be like, just get started. And that's in my video. I talk about, I started out with just an iPhone and a cheap ring light, basically. And it's going through there, and I learned some lessons. I saw there was a bunch of drop shadows or harsh shadows in my background. So there's a lot of lessons. Or if you're like, it's almost this insatiable kind of, I want to get better. I want to improve. I want to try something different. And if you could do that and just get started and just try some things out, whether you're doing development or Camtasia, is just open it up and play around with some things and try something here, try something there. I think that's the really the advice that I would give to anybody learning any new software, any new application, is just get started and just test it out and play around with it and get to know it. So.
Perfect. Well, Jeff, thank you again for joining me in the Visual Lounge.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, everybody, you heard it from Jeff. What a great summary of how you can go about building these programs, right? If it's certification, maybe it's just a rollout for a piece of technology, you've got to have multiple videos, how you can connect those in a way without, making them so intertwined that when you change one, you have to change 10 or 20. So really great advice there. And of course, we encourage you to continue to learn, continue to develop your skills, because that's what this is all about. If you're in learning development, you're in customer education, maybe you're a creator and you're looking at, hey, how do I get better at these things? You heard Jeff, get started, start doing it, learn from your processes, make some mistakes, then fix them, of course. So we hope that you get something out of this. If you got feedback for us, of course, we're always available at the Visual Lounge at techsmith.com, or you can find us on one of the various social channels. Just at TechSmith, it will get to me, I promise you. With that said, we hope you take a little time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.